Welcome back to Women in Westminster, where we explore the human stories behind the headlines. I'm your host, Eleni Barrett, and joining us today is Munira Wilson. Munira is the Liberal Democrat MP for Twickenham and has lived in her constituency since 2005. During her time as a local councillor, she helped to secure road safety improvements, to tackle crime and to protect the local environment. Munira was elected to the House of Commons in 2019 and is currently the Liberal Democrat spokesperson for education. During her time as an MP, she has helped to tackle the special educational needs and disability funding crisis, has held South Western Railway account over poor service and inaccessible stations, and has championed local people's concerns by opposing Conservative plans for a third runway at Heathrow. It's great to have you on the podcast, Munira. So to start off, one of my favourite things is food, and I'm sure that you've attended a fair number of political lunches. So I'd like to know, if you were hosting a dinner party, firstly, what would be your show-stopping dish? And secondly, which 3 people, dead or alive, would you invite?
Oh my days. If I was hosting a dinner party, well, it depends whether I'm going Western or Indian. So if I went Western, I think probably one of my best dishes is my lasagna, either meat or veggie. And if I went Indian, probably my husband and son's favourite, which is a prawn, coconut and pepper curry with rice. That's just focusing on the main course there. Who would I want? I'd want Barack Obama there for sure. Who else would I want there?
Why Obama then, above
Why
everybody
Obama?
else?
Just because I think was an inspirational political leader, obviously a trailblazer, as the first black president. It was very moving for me as somebody who was interested in politics and aspired to one day. At the time he got elected, I was already serving as a local councillor, but obviously, I by that point was already thinking about wanting to become an MP, and so to see the sort of highest office, in America, one of the most important offices,
of course, yeah.
state, elected representatives in the entire world, leader of the free world, a black man, given America's history. I just remember I was working at the time and sitting in my office sort of surreptitiously watching the inauguration ceremony, bawling my eyes out at my desk because I was so moved by it, but also just his ability to be able to speak hope into people's lives and capture people's imagination and get so many particularly younger people engaged with and activated in politics. Was just inspirational, as well as trying to bring about meaningful change, for instance, in terms of trying to make healthcare much more accessible in the US, for instance. So, we missed political leaders like that, both in the US, the UK, and anywhere. We desperately need more Obamas in this world.
I agree with you 100%.
I tell you who, just as we're talking, when you said guest dead or alive, a dead person I'd love to meet and understand about how he brought his campaign to fruition was William Wilberforce.
I would have loved to have met him.
He campaigned for a very long time to end the slave trade, and the film Amazing Grace is another one of those films that reduces me to tears, just to see how he fought and battled against the odds to bring about change. So I think
it really shows the sort of
pick his brain one day.
It really shows the sort of, if you put dedication into something that you care about, the incredible effects that it can have.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose I probably ought to have a woman in the mix. I'm going to be controversial, and rather than, because obviously someone like Obama shares my values, and to some extent William Wilberforce, when I think about his faith driving his politics, which I'd say for me does as well, I'm going to be controversial and pick somebody who I disagree with, but who was also a trailblazer in her own right. I'm going to suggest Margaret Thatcher. And my husband, who is from the north of England and couldn't stand Margaret Thatcher, would probably refuse. Would probably choke on his cornflakes at breakfast if I told him this. But I think Margaret Thatcher it would just be fascinating to hear how a woman in Parliament, a woman aspiring to be in Parliament in the 1970s, when this country was a very different place and it was much harder for women to even get into Parliament, let alone become party leader,
of course.
Prime Minister, to understand how she overcame those challenges, and also to, love her or hate her, whatever you think of her policies.
She still made history.
She made her history, but also her determination and bloody mindedness in terms of getting things done that she believed in. I mean, ultimately led to her downfall because she wasn't willing to listen to others or compromise. But I think there is still something to admire in somebody who so strongly believes in something and drives it forward. But, for what I still believe, when you look at our politics today, there are a lot of people who I think lack integrity and are only there for their own political ambition. Yes. I maybe strongly disagree with her on a lot of things, but I think she was there because she genuinely
believed in what she was saying.
And acted with integrity based on her own values and beliefs, even if you strongly disagree with them. So there we go, 2 dead people and 1 person who's still alive to come to my dinner party.
Well, that's great. But secondly, I know that members of Parliament are like flat out busy. So what's an interest of yours that you're passionate about, but you haven't had much opportunity to pursue whilst in office?
Well, I mean, my big area, my big passion is children and young people. That's why I'm delighted to speak on education, children and young people for the Liberal Democrats. And I already do a lot of work on issues relating to children and young people, but the list is endless of issues within that broader sphere that I can work on. So, I'd love to do much more around the plight of children who end up in care, but also children who get mixed up in the criminal justice system, because I think they are so badly let down, and frankly allow so many children's lives to be written off at quite a young age. And it's not a sexy issue to work on because it's not really a vote winner. But these are some of the most disadvantaged children who've had some of the toughest starts in life.
Well, of course, if we want to make society better overall, we've got to start with the young. And that means taking people that are disadvantaged and creating equity. You used to work as the campaigns organiser for Sue Doughty. So what's the most unusual or memorable campaign strategy that you've ever employed, then or now, and did it work?
I'd say probably the most memorable campaign tactic I've deployed has not been actually when I was working for the Liberal Democrats or in a Liberal Democrat capacity.
Oh, right.
I would say it was when I was working for the charity Save the Children, and we used to go to all of the party conferences, so that was quite an eye-opener for me, going to Conservative and Labour Party conference as well as Lib Dems, and we would hold fringe meetings and events there discussing issues relevant to the campaigns we were working on. And if you've ever been to party conference, you will know that you get hundreds of flyers given to you by different organisations who are trying to promote their event and trying to get people, delegates, to come to their fringe event. And so we went for a different tactic, and after lots of brainstorming, and we kicked about lots of ideas in the office, how do we catch MPs, particularly ministers, because at the time that I was doing this event at Labour Party conference, we actually had a Labour government, shows you how old I am and how long ago I worked for Save the Children. How do we capture particularly parliamentarians' attention when so many other things competing for attention? And instead of a flyer, we decided that when you go to party conference, you're really hungry quite often and you don't get much healthy food. So we decided to buy big crates of bananas, and we had these little banana jackets with Save the Children branding and details of our event made up, and we put these little jackets on the bananas, and we were handing out bananas to the delegates as they were going into the conference centre. And we caught a few at the time ministers, Andy Burnham, who's now obviously Mayor of Greater Manchester. Yeah. I think he was Chief Secretary to the Treasury at the time, and various other Labour ministers. Ed Miliband, I remember doorstepping him and stopping them on their way in, giving them a banana with one of these Save the Children jackets, saying, please come to our event. I think it was on child poverty, because we did lots of campaigning on child poverty at the time. And that was pretty cool, but it was hard work because I and my colleague at the time were literally lugging these crates of bananas around and putting these little jacket things on them and handing them out. So it was quite a lot of manual labour.
It was worth it. It was worth it.
Yeah. I can't say we got any of those big names along to our fringe event, but hopefully just seeing the Save the Children logo and seeing that we were doing work on child poverty just helped bring it to the forefront of their mind when they were having discussions, in their ministerial teams, and maybe they got to enjoy a nice banana at the same time. Gave them an energy.
Win-win, yeah. Can you share a moment from your childhood or upbringing that you believe has had a significant impact on your political views or your career path?
Ooh. So probably in terms of the impact on my career path, one of the things that I often say is when I studied A-level politics, um, our local MP at the time would regularly take politics students from my school, like 2 or 3 of us once a year, to the House of Commons to watch Prime Minister's Question and have tea.
Oh,
And I remember going to Parliament with John Marshall was his name, the Conservative MP for Finchley and Golders Green at the time. And I remember thinking, this is so cool. Like, it would be so cool to be an MP. I'd love to do that one day. But I didn't think anything more of it because I had no clue about that world and how one got into it. And I didn't come from a family of political activists or politicians. And it was just a world that was completely foreign to me and not something that I felt that someone like me from my background could aspire to. And so I remember very strongly remember having that thought, but then putting it to one side and not really knowing what I was going to do after graduation from university. I sort of floundered for a bit and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And eventually I got interested. I was so getting more and more angry about various issues that I got involved politically and then realised actually this is something I want to try and pursue and work out how to do it. So that's probably a moment during my A-level politics career. But I think more generally, when I look back on my childhood, I think I always quite like to be quite contrary and trigger debates and discussions and maybe take a different view to what was, what my friends or other people might.
which is a good way to be.
But I think that's also where the liberal in me comes from, because liberals tend to be non-conformists. We like to be difficult. We like to challenge and take an alternative view and not follow the flock, as it were. And so I think that's probably where some of my liberalism comes from. But also, I think back to the values that were instilled in me by my parents, who drummed into me the importance of education, hard work, and doing well for yourself, which to some extent is very much part of conservative philosophy. But why I say I'm a liberal is because at the same time, they were also always very concerned about making sure that we looked out for and looked after
Other
those
people,
who were
yeah.
less fortunate, and and always valued strong public services. And so I didn't fall into the conservative mould. I didn't fall into the Labour mould. It was always, we value entrepreneurism, we value personal and individual effort and freedom, but we also really value the importance of community and looking out for those who may not be able to help themselves, and it's important to balance the two. And that's why, I guess, without knowing it, I feel like I had the values of liberalism instilled into me from a young age.
Yeah, wow. I think that's a good mix to have. Kind of like the best aspects of both ideologies of the major parties. Join us for part 2 to hear more about Munira's journey.